There's nothing better. You negotiate the deal and you start thinking and planning your life. And my roommate got me a book on, how to speak German, and I'm planning all this stuff. And about 2 weeks before I was meant to leave again, I get the call. The European studio backed out. They're scrapping the entire project. It's over.
If you got something, let it rip.
I'm never going to do this again.
Everybody grapples with this idea that you're really a fraud.
Like, I'm alive.
And that's when it clicked with me. I thought, these are not superheroes. These are just men that can do super things.
This is Matt Del Negro, and you are listening to the new stripped down 10,000 No's. So we've got a special guest with us today. It is Ian Bohen, and he and I go way back. So first I want to say hello to the millions of Ian Bohen fans out there, because they are out there, and just tell you this podcast is 10,000 No's. It was very consistent back in the day, 2017. We had all kinds of entrepreneurs and crash victims and all people from all walks of life talking about how they overcame whatever they had to overcome to get to where they are. In the recent years, it's been more entertainment industry centric. And in the recent years, I've been pretty busy. So it's kind of been a lot of just excerpts from I have like a virtual community with actors, and we pull excerpts and do these short ones. But every once in a while, an old friend like Ian reaches out, and truth be told, I actually tried to get him on the show for about, 17 years. No, probably since we started. It's like almost from when I began, I was like, hey, we got to do it. And we just never lined up. And
that's mostly my fault. I'll take most of the credit, because I always I'm on it. And I've always found excuses. I'm a bit of a procrastinator. And, but when I'm ready to hit, I think I called you 2 days ago and I was like, do you want to do this thing? And you're like, Tuesday morning. I'm like, done. So in the matter of 30 hours, we had it lined up, and here we are. So apologies for the delay, but better late than never.
Yeah. And it's truthfully, I said to him, I was like, we haven't really done it. I had Tom Fontana, we interviewed recently, and haven't even put it out. And my thing now is this podcast has become an excuse to connect with old friends or people that I find interesting that I've wanted to talk to for a while. And, yeah, when you said you wanted to do it, I was like, let's just figure it out. We'll get on a Zoom. It's not complicated. And the things that I kind of want to get into, I mean, there are too many things for us to even get to it this quickly. But really, just having worked with you at first on Teen Wolf, then we did Wind River together, watching the meteoric rise of Yellowstone. You and Taylor have a relationship. That's Taylor Sheridan, for those who don't know, who created Yellowstone. I think you guys were buddies from before we did Wind River. I'm just like, I've watched you in your career. You negotiate your career in such an awesome way. Like you really seem you're loving your life, and you have been since I met you. You travel around. When it was Teen Wolf, you were doing autograph signings, I think, in Europe. I would always see you on Instagram skiing, like in the Alps. And I'm like, how is this guy is living this incredible life? We did Wind River together. We shot each other up in the snow. I killed Ian. He did not kill me. Jeremy Renner took me out with a bear rifle. But then we went to Sundance together. And I remember, I'll leave the mic to you, but I do remember something that I thought was very, very, telling of our friendship. We hung out the last night in Sundance, and we grabbed a cab to Salt Lake City to go, Salt Lake City, to get a plane back to LA. I was living on the West Coast at the time as well. And we got there at like 5 a.m. for like a 6 a.m. flight. And we got there, and you had like the clear thing or TSA or clear. I didn't have anything at the time. And I was like, and you're like, I'll see you at the gate. And I was like, that motherfucker. I'm like, he's a world traveler. He's got no kids. I got kids. I haven't even thought about TSA yet. Since then, I have gotten it. But I remember thinking, I was like, oh yeah, we're kind of overlapping, but living different lives. But I've really admired the way you've used social media, the way you've used your celebrity to spotlight causes that you're passionate about. And I'm just kind of, want to get into your approach to this whole crazy business, starting with, full circle with Kevin Costner. Remember I texted you one night, I was watching, was it Wyatt Earp? And
yeah, that was a big break with Kevin back in 93, 92, 93, something like that came out. So,
and I had no idea
30
you were
years
in
ago.
it. I was watching it and I see this young kid who was like, what, 12 or 13 years old?
I think I was probably 15 at the time, maybe 16.
And I'm like, wait a second, go and look it up. And there you are. And I think I texted you. I had no idea that you were a young Wyatt Earp. And so walk us through how early did you know that acting was the thing you were going to pursue?
Okay. Really complex question with a huge timeline. First of all, thank you for the intro. Very flattering. All of these stories are true, by the way. I do have, as I look back at when I started this grand adventure, it has several eras. And I like to think I might be in the fourth act of it. And I'll start at the beginning. I was a massive fan of movies. I was a movie kid in the 80s, so in 1985 I was 9, and 86 I was 10, and that was like the heyday for the Goonies and Top Gun and Hunt for Red October and practical cinema that they don't really make so much anymore. And every day after school I would go home and I would stick one of 5 or 10 VHSs into the VCR. A lot of you are going to have to look up what that acronym means. And I would play, and I would sit and watch a movie. I wouldn't do my homework. I would sit on the couch. I would eat candy, and I would make myself a bowl of microwave popcorn. And I would get immersed in Raiders of the Lost Ark or Young Guns or Die Hard. And I just marveled that these things were made. And just a few years prior to that, I wasn't quite sure if the reality of all this. I still lived in this bubble. And I remember having a conversation with my mom, and I remember saying, I would love to spend some time with Tom Cruise and have him teach me how to fly a fighter jet. And I remember the look on her face, just to like, oh, bless his heart, he doesn't know yet. And my brother was about to take a breath and say, hey, dipshit, that's not real. And my mother shushed him, but I kind of had the sense of like, there's something going on that I don't know. And so I continued this love affair. I kept watching these movies, and it didn't occur to me at the time that acting, that you would go in, this was a profession, that you could do this. I wanted to be a fighter pilot when I was a kid. After I saw Top Gun in the theater probably a dozen times. And shortly thereafter, I'm in elementary school. And I remember one day I couldn't see the chalkboard as clearly as I had in the past. And I was just having a bit of an issue. So eventually, of course, we end up in the optometrist's office. And I remember the moment where the doc says, we're going to get you some glasses. And what I did know for sure at that moment was that I could never be a fighter pilot. And I cried my eyes out, and I went home, and my mom cried with me, and I ate a bag of carrots that were in the refrigerator, because I had heard somewhere that the vitamins in carrots are helpful to your eye health. And I thought, well, if I eat enough, I might cure my problem. I might be able to be a pilot. And God bless my mother, she let me eat all of them. And so I had to deal with that tragedy. And then once I realized that Tom Cruise wasn't really flying the planes, I guess at some point it occurred to me, well, maybe I could pretend to do them. So that was the beginning of understanding this new fantasy life, which was, when you think about it in retrospect, almost as exciting as doing things for real, because you could have different jobs. So a year or two later, we're driving around. My mom took me everywhere. She's the reason why I'm where I'm at today. She sacrificed her career to take me on all my auditions and do everything. We're driving one day, and she coming home from school or something, and we hear a commercial that says, do you want to be on TV? Do you like film? Do you like commercials? You could do this. And my ears perk up, and I'm like, what is this? So, this was back when there was radio commercials. And so we took the number down and we called, and essentially it was like a phone book of young, new, burgeoning actors and actresses. You get your picture taken, and casting directors and filmmakers and agents are meant to look through it, circle your picture, you look up your information, call you in, for a casting call, basically. And that's what happened. And I showed up somewhere in Hollywood. It was probably Burbank or somewhere like that at the time. I must have been 11 or 12. Hundreds of kids in this office.
Where were you living again, Ian, at this point?
At the time, I was living in the very east end of LA County in a little township. I'm not even sure it was a city at that point, called Diamond Bar. It was the Diamond Bar Ranch, which Snoop Dogg is also a proud resident of, and I believe he's from there as well. So about 45 minutes east of the city. Nothing out there, total suburbs. So I get into, the city, get into Hollywood. And of course I'm like, what is this place? It's one of the first big cities I'd ever seen. So we wait around for hours and we watch all this thing happen. And I get in and it was an agency. It was just starting out. They were really good with kids, young adults, and they wanted to build their roster. So they thought, let's have a giant casting call. We called them, at the time they were called cattle calls. And they just interviewed you and they ask, I was 10 or 11 or 12, and they just ask you what you like, what you're into. And I have no idea what to say or how to be affected, just kind of talk. And they thought, this is someone maybe we could work with. We're going to put you on consignment, if you will, give you some auditions, see what happens. And then we'll gauge you. If you do great, you'll keep going. If you're not really up for it and the feedback is terrible, they're going to cut you loose, right? So that was, I want to say I was 11 or 12. And they picked me to do that. We started doing that process. And I like to say I just haven't quit yet. And that was going on 35 years ago. So that's how I fell into acting. I fast forward to the third act. I didn't actually decide I am going to do this and put all my eggs in this basket until I was about 26. So I spent 13 years goofing off, deciding I wanted to play baseball after school instead of going to auditions. I wanted to be in karate or the Cub Scouts, or and then later I went to college, and you have to study, and you can't just be goofing around. So you spend a lot of those 13 years doing other things, really not being invested. And then around 24, 25, I decided if I'm going to do it, I have to do it full speed. And that's when I became very motivated. So between the next 15 years is when I put in my 10,000 hours. And the fourth act has been, blessed with steady work for the last 12 or 14 years. And then I'm just now entering the fifth. And so we'll see what that looks like.
It's so cool for you to break it down for people that might not know the industry, because a lot of it, obviously I do this as well, so I know it, but I'm thinking of all the young people out there that are listening and just realizing at some point, everybody started way outside of this. And the Raiders of the Lost Ark example, that was the first movie that came with our VCR. That was when we got the VCR in whatever that was, maybe 1980. I watched that thing till I wore it out. I knew every line of that movie. And I also had no idea until, at least a decade later, this wasn't even on my radar. I had the same thing where it's like, oh, it's Indiana Jones. Like, I don't even know if I put it together. That's a guy who goes to work to pretend to be Indiana. I don't know what I thought. I just didn't think about it.
Yeah, and God bless the youth and the naivete and the innocence of not breaking out of that bubble and just enjoying it for what it is. They don't make them like that anymore. And it's important. I'm glad you brought up the youth interaction and idea with entertainment and specifically cinema and film and TV. It's a question I get asked a lot. We do conventions, as you mentioned, all over the world. And, it's all young people, mostly all young people. And inevitably, the first or second question is, what advice do you have for people that want to be young artists, performers, specifically within motion picture? And I really think, and I talk about a lot, and I tweet a lot or X about this idea of what young people see as an audience member and how they take in this content versus what it is to go to work and to do it. And anytime a young person says, well, I want to be an actor, I almost cringe inside. And my friends and I, we talk about this because you have no idea what the work is like. what you see, and this is the dangerous part, is you see celebrity, you see magazines, you see, Entertainment Tonight segments, you see concerts, you see the crumpet, if you will. But the day-to-day work is, and you know this as well as anybody, Matt, is so different. And the magnetic appeal that young people think they want to put their life into. I'm not saying don't do it, but there has to be a way to experience it where you can really truly understand what it is like to be at work all the time, as opposed to what it looks like it is to be someone that gets to work all the time, that it becomes successful. And it's a night and day difference. So I have a hard time being honest and without really warning young people off about finding out what it is. I didn't, even though I loved film and TV and all these movies, these magic movies, it took me 10 years to realize whether or not I really liked what it is to be on set every day. And it's a lot of the time it's awful. It's hard work. It's uncomfortable. You're cold, you're wet, it's dark. You're getting in a fight scene, you're getting cut up and scraped, and it's, or you wait around all the time, or you're doing something that doesn't seem meaningful. And you just question constantly, like, what am I doing? What is this? And it's not what it looks like. So having said all of that, that's like the warning label. There's a ton of good side, and upside to it that we can get into later. But it took me a solid decade of working before I really understood what I was thinking I wanted to do.
Yeah. That was the whole point of this podcast originally, was I felt like, depending where if someone just knew me from town, I was just a dad and a husband and whatever. But if someone saw me in an airport and they had an idea, I could tell by the questions that they asked or the way they approached, they thought my life was way different from what it really was. And so that was the impetus of the whole podcast was, oh, if they see me this way, well, then maybe I'm seeing Kevin Bacon in a way that's not accurate to his life. And then also maybe other people in other industries, also, we see someone who's this hugely successful entrepreneur and it looks like, oh, they just, ride around on, private jets all day. Well, no, there was a story that got them there. And that's what I'm fascinated by. And that's kind of what you're talking about. It's like the dichotomy between the facade, which is a lot of what people are exposed to, even on, social media, maybe especially on social media, or like you said, even in the final cut of a film. That's the performance that's edited. There's the facade, and then there's the reality underneath it, which has, in some ways is better than the facade, and in some ways is tougher than the facade.
I think that what you just said is exactly the same across all sectors, and it's not confined to. We think that Hollywood and music performance has all of this fanciful decoration that and it does for sure. But you could be in finance or banking, you could be in government, you could be in education, you could be in the automotive industry. It almost doesn't matter what that is, and we don't have a monopoly on things not being as they seem, but we're all humans, and this is something that I'm thinking about a lot, is what is the point? Like, what gets you out of bed in the morning, and what do you want to do? What's your messaging? What do you care about? Versus what you thought your industry was going to give you, whether you're super wealthy, super successful, and does it match up? And are you satisfied? And a lot of people will, in my industry for sure, have what you would see as like the cream of the crop, more than you could ever possibly wish for in life. And the percentage of them that are truly happy is, down here. And then that's a little bit tragic, but again, I think that's just life. It's not necessarily Hollywood. It's the difference between internal self-validation, integrity, and self-realization versus external celebrity poured on top of you. And that's what they don't teach you as an actor. I started acting class when I was 11. And as I became, an adolescent and a teenager and a young man and a man, I realized that the life lessons that you need to be a successful human were not part of the curriculum. And me and my friends joke, we have a list of things that they don't teach you in acting class, because the whole point is just to work or to become a little bit famous or to become a celebrity. And then you're like on your way. And, for the last, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 years, I thought I am woefully unequipped to navigate what this career has given me, because the idea that you're ever going to achieve, a continuous working status and money and all this influence, that's never, like, you can't go into it thinking you're going to get that. The best we ever thought as kids was, if I could just work, make a living, that would be enough. And that there's other stages above that. And when you start to get into the other stages, it's so uncharted. And that's where mental health issues come in huge, because you're almost like a underdeveloped person that became static once you reach a certain level, because you don't have to develop much more than you just keep doing what you're doing. You're making the money, you have influence, you can pay for things, and people respect your opinion. You stop thinking about creative intelligence within your own mind to evolve. And when I realized that I was doing that, then I was like, well, now I have a new mission. And it went away from artistic output and it went back to input when I was younger. And that's predominantly books, older books. I stopped reading fiction for a really long time, because I was like, I don't have time for fantasy anymore. I need to know some real basic true information and think. And I wish that had been integrated into my, the upbringing, but it's not part of it. They just teach you how to get jobs, how to perform, hit your mark, do the thing, and then the rest of it is on your own. So to all you young actors, you have to balance out your growth between now and what you think your future is, because otherwise you literally will be left standing when the music stops, and that is a really tough thing to scramble back to.
Yeah, that's kind of you're describing what became my mission with the podcast and the book. All this stuff was like, what are the life lessons behind this? My thought, which is agree with what you said about that, it's across all industries and all walks of life, and it's just, what is whatever it is you're doing, that's just the backdrop. For us, it's acting. That's the backdrop. It's a volatile backdrop, more so than, I would say pro sports and entertainment are very volatile, because there's no, there's no kind of like, it's like you could get a lot and you could also just have nothing. There's no safety net. But the principles are the same. Like you said, whatever it is you're doing, it's like, what's the work that's being put into it? How do you said something earlier that is really, I think, true. Your self-worth has to come from within. If you're only feeling good when you're getting cast in something or when something's a big hit, yeah, that's a rough road. And I know we're all susceptible to it to some degree, but that's a really rough road when you start buying into the press of whether it's your own career or the project you're a part of, and you forget the fundamentals underneath. I think that's a scary place to be, because it's hard enough. It's going to go up and down.
It's hard enough for a grown adult to and those big disappointments and those big highs and big lows are what they are. They're effective. I love joy. I love screaming, off the top of my lungs when something great happens. And conversely, I get low. I'm very, very polar in that sense. I can rebalance much more quickly than I used to be, because I've worked on this. Young people, they're completely governed by their emotions, and they will live in the extremes, and they will want to perpetuate the joy and perpetuate the sorrow, because that's just what kids do. No offense to kids, you just haven't learned it yet. If there is a way to help people get back to that self-actualization, that's something I want to be a part of. It's an incredibly sycophantish business that that is predicated on being selected as a young eligible, take acting for example. You are an employee. You're really not creating anything. Someone is choosing you. So you get this, and I'm speaking for myself growing up in Hollywood and learning how to be a person from a very young age. The process of being chosen became paramount to me. And you start to understand how to become selected. And then your worth becomes, do I get selected? And well, you start doing that for 3, 4, 5, 10 years, it changes your life outlook and how you feel about not being selected. A normal, well-balanced person may lose something or miss an opportunity and be, oh, that's really a bummer. That would have been great. A young actor is crippled weeks, sometimes months on end, because of that process has led them in a direction they just sometimes can't recover. That's incredibly dangerous for your psyche. I battled with that. I can tell you 4 or 5 different times in life where I thought I'm finished because something that was good was taken away in this business, and I had to readjust, and it took a really long time. But that's what the business
share any of those or no?
Let's see.
Would they be helpful, or are they too personal?
No, let's see. The one that comes to mind the most. I was probably 23. I had left UCLA after 3 years, and a mountain of student debt that was accumulating rapidly. And I looked at it realizing, I'm like, what is this ever going to be for me? I could get a degree, but what am I going to do with that? I couldn't afford to go to college anymore. And I was starting to work a little bit. So it became, in my mind, that the smart choice was to chase the work. I can always go back to school. And of course, in short order, I was living in Hollywood and had, the money was running out, and, was working at bars, trying to make cash under the table at night so I could go to auditions on the weekend. And I got a job. I got cast in a series. It was a European production with some American companies to be D'Artagnan in a sort of Three Musketeers, I guess, prequel. He wasn't a musketeer, but he was part of the lore. This famous swordsman. It was going to be a period piece. We were going to shoot it in Germany, and it was essentially the lead. And I had been chosen to do this thing. And I'm like, period piece, swashbuckling, sword fighting. I mean, this is like Indiana Jones. This is everything I'd ever fantasized about. I'm going to do it. And the elation, there's nothing better. There's nothing better. And you negotiate the deal and you start thinking and planning your life. And my roommate got me a book on, how to speak German, and I'm planning all this stuff. And about 2 weeks before I was meant to leave again, I get the call. The European studio backed out. They're scrapping the entire project. It's over. And I entered a level of depression that I have never since realized, because I had created an elevated sense of what my whole life was about based on my selection. And then the valley that I fell into was equally as tall on the downside. And I didn't know how to mentally talk to myself and navigate and strength-wise float. I couldn't tread water. And I would say I was clinically depressed for months, and it, like, inconsolable. I couldn't see future. I couldn't see. As grownups now, we can see across the horizon. We know how to tread water. We know how to get up. I had no ability. No one had ever taught me how to do that. And so that will always stick with me, how it was worse than maybe any heartbreak I've ever had, because it was more about me being unselected or what have you. So that was one. I may tell you some more later. there are more, but that was the first one. And then, of course, ironically, as you look back, each one helps you begin the process of learning how to structure it so that you have your built-in safety net. So when that fall happens, you only go so low, like tying into clips. If you've ever climbed a mountain or been rock climbing, you only fall twice the distance to your last clip in. Well, I had never clipped in. So I fell all the way. And so now I know how to clip in better and can adjust.
Thank you for sharing that,
Of
because
course.
I kind of felt like we were speaking in like philosophically, and I thought, it'd be interesting to get to the heart of it, like for someone to hear that and to see that. Even me knowing you, I don't know that story. As you were saying it, like it hits me on an emotional level, and then I was thinking of myself and thinking, oh man, that's really hard. I never had, like, I had a very, very slow kind of getting into the business, where I never had a lead thing offered to me. I did, but it wasn't on something that was going to Germany. It was like something that was in Boston that I was like driving myself to. And it was cool and it was big, but it was big at the time at least. But I never had that when I was that young. When you're that young, like you're saying, that's a lot to deal with. And I guess in some weird ways, I have an appreciation now and a gratitude now for how slow it was for me up front, because I learned a lot of those kind of like managing my expectations and staying level-headed.
Yeah.
It was front loaded for me, because I
How
was
to be a human before you get
yeah.
saddled
And then
with.
by the time I started getting stuff, I realized like, well, I know who my friends are, and I'm going to take this as it is, but I'm going to kind of see what this is for what it is a little bit. I mean, I'm sure I got swept up into stuff. I did, but it was in a way like what you're talking about is tough when you're that young,
Sure. And it's that was one of the worst of them, again, because I was ill-equipped. There's other stories very similar to that where the same idea chops you in half. And it doesn't stop. I mean, I've been, fired from jobs. There's been jobs I thought for sure I was going to get down to one or two people, and the unthinkable happens. The other guy, who's actually a famous mythical creature that we all, in the business created, he's called the other guy. Like, who got the job? The other guy. So he must be rich and famous somewhere, but the other guy beat me 8 out of 10 times. You get better at handling it later. If you start out with an unbroken family and you do more normal things, and maybe you get married and you have your own family, you get more grounded in truth than you do. I had to wade through all that kind of in a solo way. So it became much harder, but and it took me quite a bit longer to get to where I think I'm much more balanced than I ever was. But I really want to impress on young people how much self-work you have to do before you become a success. Otherwise, you're going to think that your success in the industry is life success, and it's not, which is a bit of a downer. But for me, the goal is to help people be healthy. And it's just not spoken of. It's just, we watch America's Got Talent and Idol and all these contestant shows, and it's just like win, win, win. And they don't show you how hard it is, what the downside is. And again, don't want to make it sound negative. It's a wonderful industry. It just needs to be approached correctly. And it's not being done that way because, we're I don't want to say the product, but we're the laborers that are making this bigger product. And we are meant to do that, to assemble it. And if you can't get it done, they'll find somebody else. And that's a bummer too, because then it makes it feel like you're not special, right? And if you're not special, you don't feel good, you're not happy. And, as we said before, our goal is to feel like we're valuable or important.
Talk to me a little bit about friendships in the business, because that's a big thing for me. I do this thing, Insiders Community, and it's kind of meant to replicate what I was lucky enough to have coming up, which is a couple of really tight friends who I met either on a job, like maybe in like a terrible black box theater in New York, or in an acting class, early days of New York. And we've talked each other off the ledge when needed. Sometimes it flip-flops from minute to minute, second to second. I know, I mentioned Taylor before, but there's also you're super tight with a lot of the cast on Teen Wolf that I think you're still tight with them. Talk to me about the importance of friendships, real friendships, and community in this industry, because for me, that is like the thing I'm most grateful for. And the only reason I'm still kicking is that I have some real true friends that, like, when I get something, they're happy for me. When they get something, I'm happy for them. When we have that little bit of like jealousy, we say it to each other. We go, okay, I'm going to just say, you just got this big thing. It shines a light on where I'm not. And we get it out, like it's all cleared.
Yes.
And it's all there because that's real. But for me, that's huge. And I think from my vantage point, watching you since I've known you, which was, I don't know, I don't even know what year it was, 2015, 2014. I've seen you with the same kind of group of friends. And I'm guessing that has a lot to do with your centeredness.
My understanding of relationship, friendship, has evolved from when I got to Southern California and began my growing up phase in earnest. Before that, my buddies, we played football in the streets after school, or we played stickball. We rode our bikes together, and that was my understanding of what friendship was about. What did we do that was mutual, that we enjoyed, and it was fun. And that's what kids do. As I got older, the oldest friends that I am still in contact with are the first people that I met when I got to Southern California in about 12 or 13 years old. Jenna Green, Joel Mikely in my first acting class with Ernie Lively over 30 years ago. And it wasn't until the last 10 years where I realized I started to sort of do an audit on the people that I know, my acquaintances, my colleagues versus my friends versus my brothers. And I look back at the stages. In the beginning, you have all your buddies that you go to acting class with, and you do, you go out, maybe have a bite or a drink afterwards, and you have fun, and it's the sequence and the repetition of being together. You're like, well, that's my friend. At a certain point, you start to subconsciously or quite openly examine, what is it about them that I enjoy, and can I match up with what they're giving me, and are we truly bonded or connected by something more important than just similar interests? And when I started thinking about that, I would realize that my friend pool started to slim. Even some of my best friends from high school, you sort of lose touch, and you're not there as often. There's distance separating you, and so that starts to go down. And then every once in a while, you would meet someone new. And around this time, I would say in my early 20s, it would be very difficult to make a new friend. A little bit weary, and just like, we're not going to go ride BMX bikes together. We're not going to watch Top Gun together. So what are we going to do? Like, why are we going to be friends? And what happens is it takes hold of you in a very authentic way. And you just sort of know inside who's my guy and who's not. And then you have these experiences, which really, for me, solidified a bond of true, like, sameness. And those are some of the guys that I call them my men, the men that I've had in my life for 15, 20 years now. Then you introduce them to one another, and then you start to grow this little posse pod, and then, some outliers kind of kick out or what have you. And then it gets distilled down to core people. Teen Wolf was a very interesting beginning for me. I want to say 31 when I got that job, maybe 32. And I was running around Hollywood, and I was bartending, I was doing the thing, and just being like, what the hell, how is this going to work? Did I miss the signpost? I think I chose wrong. I don't know what to do. And I had my buddies, I had my friends, and guys that are still brothers to this day. But and not to discount that at all. Some of my greatest friends were from the bar that I was working at last. Christopher and Paul and Maddie and George for sure. But the work on Teen Wolf and the camaraderie of being on set every day and making these artistic decisions and trying to figure out what we want to present really elevates people on your level that you can sync with. And there's, you were there, hundreds of people worked on Teen Wolf over the course of the series. Tyler Hoechlin and J.R. Bourne I speak to one of them every day, at least. Holland Roden, Ryan Kelly. And then you get a new family, which is such a blessing. Most people in whatever career sector they're in, that just doesn't happen. They have work friends, but we spend the time that you spend in the early morning, the late night, and the hardships and the, off hours. You get to build that. And I'll take them with me, forever. I'm going to be in their weddings. I'm going to stand next to them forever. Yellowstone, very similar kind of thing. These are jobs that don't come around very often, but God, I'm sort of rambling on your question, but to one thing you did say, I do examine the relationships a lot in how I react to their good news, like you mentioned, because there are moments when something great will happen to one of your friends and you can't help but react with like, shit, that didn't happen to me. And you make it about this. And then you think, well, I'm such an asshole. Hold on a second. That's great for you. And that's just part of humanity. And actors, especially, are very insecure. We're very like, me. So to fight that off and just remember, Hoechlin is a great example. He works all the time. He's younger than me. He's an inch taller than me. He's Superman. So every time something good happens, I'm like, damn it. But of course, in the same breath, I love him. He's my brother. Now, there's a series of acquaintances that I have that I know that are, good buddies that I might be more to live in like the shit. What am I doing wrong? I can't, that's not happening to me or whatever. And I might spend more time there. So then I have to realize, okay, you have to know where your relationships are versus your acquaintances. So it really helps me understand where I need to spend my time, where I want to spend my time and my effort. As I get older, the last friend that I made, like a new friend, is probably 3 years deep now, maybe 3 to 4 years. But between the last 4 years and now, I won't let a new person in because it just requires too much. Yeah. So that was my long-winded answer. Sorry.
No, it's apparent from the outside, that you have a crew that you run with, and it's really cool. I mean, I think I have a different thing where I have a smaller group within the business that I'm really tight with. And then I have, like you said, I have my brother who's he's in finance. He's not in this at all. And then, and my sister, and I have my wife and her family and high school friends and college friends, but you don't see them, and then there's like phases of life where now I'm back on the East Coast. I've reconnected with high school friends more, that we always kept it up. But now we're, the kids are together. There's like,
sure.
My son is going to go away with one of my best friends from growing up. He's going to literally, like, last minute, he's going with them on a vacation because the kids all get along. He's like, why didn't you come? And it's so cool to see.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
And it really, all of that, whether it's in the business, it's out of the business, I think it just grounds you in that this is no longer, for me, I would say at this age, that I always say, like, the greatest get that I ever had and probably ever will get is Sopranos. And it's not because it's the greatest get. It's because I was 30 years old and I got this big show, and I was young enough that it was like, now if I get something, I'm like, oh, cool. That's awesome. Like, I'm very excited about it, but it's not my entire life. No matter
Correct.
what.
Yes.
It could be a better get than that, but it's not comparatively to everything. it's just, I just know too much that
yes. And those phases you have a section of years where you're so willing to absorb new people and pull the life in, almost like those coming of age John Hughes movies, where you want to scoop all that up and feel it. And for me, as I get older, you know, it's not, I don't want to say I'm not looking for any new friends, but I'm just like, I'm so nuclearized that even though on a new great job, I'm probably not going to get any more best friends. And that's okay, because we're just, you know, we're getting older. And it just makes me appreciate the ones that I have even more so. And that's, you know, that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, two things I want to get, because I want to I don't want to take all of your time. But two things I do want to get to. One is, you know, Yellowstone is one of these phenomenons. They don't come, like you said before, they don't come around. Teen Wolf was as well for a certain demographic. Yellowstone seems like just, you know, a supernova. I'm curious to hear just the effect of that on your life, on your career, that kind of thing. And then also I want to talk about just a little bit about how you handle social media, because what you do so beautifully is you're really funny. I mean, anybody who's listening or watching this who doesn't know Ian, you're going, oh, he's a really deep guy. He's a real deep thinker. You may not realize how funny he is. You're a very stealth comedian, and you're very efficient. I mean, I just like things you do with like cooking eggs and your Instagram stories that are very funny. Like I'll watch the whole thing. There's just like very, very funny sense of humor. But
Thank you.
What you've done with your, I guess it's your relationship to your audience or your fans seems really special. And the way you've navigated it is really cool. And I'm curious to hear how you kind of process it in your mind, and how what your relationship is to that. So it's a two-part question. Is kind of that, and then there's like the effect of Yellowstone. Have you noticed it opening up other doors? Have you noticed it, you know, what, if anything?
Yeah. So on the social media thing, I got pretty fortunate to get in on the concept very early, in the early days of Twitter. Colton Haynes, who is just a magician of being on the forefront of what's coming, would always, you know, we would be jerking around and goofing off and whatever during takes, and we would look over and Colton would be sitting on his phone, and we'd say, "What are you doing?" And he'd be like, "Shush, I'm tweeting." And we're like, "What does that mean?" And so he was way ahead of all of us, and he got me thinking, like, what is this? So imagine, we all get what it is now and how important that messaging is, but back then it was not a thing. So I started, you know, I was curious early, and I just watched it all and read it all to figure out what the flow was and how to do it. And along the way, I decided that I wanted to be very organic. No one was going to manage that stuff for me. And that I would, if I had a grasp of how I felt about things, what my convictions were, and was willing to express them, that there would be an audience for how I felt. Everybody thinks that their taste is mainstream. Maybe not. But I don't have to please everybody. Probably going to offend a ton of people. But I think a good section of people are going to be relatable. So I felt strong that I would be all right. And then I felt very safe in being quite a bit goofy, even dorky at times, and enjoying what I think is important. And it just sort of snowballed. And then, you know, Instagram came along, and then you got to add photos to it. Then you got to add motion picture stories to it. And all of a sudden it was just like little snippets of what I thought was funny. And if I could make myself laugh, I would say that's probably going to do well. And sure enough, that works. So I do my best to do things that are goofy. And I think if things are funny, that's where they come from.
Yeah.
And then to move on to Yellowstone. Yellowstone was a phenomenon. I just came off of Teen Wolf. I think we shot our last episode in May, and then in July, Yellowstone started. Didn't know what it was going to be. It was billed to me as, we're doing this cowboy show. It's going to be a lot of fun. Come play with us. And this filmmaker, after Wind River and Hell or High Water and Sicario, when that person asks you to come and do something, you absolutely say yes. Sky's going to be the limit. And there were times along the way of this roller coaster where, no doubt, I called my manager and I said, get me out of here. I want to quit. It's
Why?
too much. So at the time, I was in an underdeveloped, let's say an artistically underdeveloped state of not being fulfilled or feeling valuable or important enough, because I didn't think that my character and what I had to give to the story wasn't being utilized. It was sort of just being there a lot, but not important. Not that I wanted to, be the star of the show, but I was watching so much go on. It was so dynamic, so many characters and tons of people and such big storylines. I didn't understand my part within it. And all I could see was no one cares about me. And I'm spending my opportunity cost, my time here. Maybe I could do something that would be more important. And I didn't understand, if I reversed my thinking and I played my part to its potential, it could rise up within everything. And most certainly, once I changed my attitude, it did. And that's when it's, right around the third season, I just got it. I was like, oh, the problem is me. And I changed my perspective. And then I felt like what I was doing was so important. And coincidentally, the fans responded, the network responded, the writing, responded and changed, or it didn't, or my perception changed. And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, people really care about what you're doing, and they want to talk to you about it. They want to stop you at the airport. They want an autograph. They want a picture. They want to tell you how much it impacts their family when they all watch it together, or their community, or how it makes them feel good about themselves. And then you start thinking about those things, put yourself to the side. It's not about you. And you integrate with the audience. And then you're like, this is why I do it. This is important, which I'd never thought about before, because it was always about me. And you turn that outside into the world. And that there is, if you call it art, which I don't consider myself an artist. I don't like that idea. If that's for the audience to bequeath upon the person and say, what you have made is art. I don't think you can say that. But that outward looking opens you up to be okay to do that thing. Then all the great things start happening and the opportunities come in. You start making some money, and then you become more creative. Your output becomes bigger, and you're on a different, different kind of rocket ship. So I'm very lucky to have not sabotaged myself in that middle section where I thought, I don't understand how to do this. I had a ton of people around me to sit me down, calm me down, and guide me, if you will. But I was, it was close. I was close to just missing it and breaking the whole thing off because I was stubborn and dumb. But I just ate it for a while and then realized it was all internal. And when I fixed that, let me tell you, the happiness came, the sunshine came out. I wasn't upset or frustrated. I was sleeping better. I was happier. My relationships are better. Everything. It was a psychological experiment, if you will. It was therapy. So I'm blessed for that, because I could have gone the other way and been just, tragic.
Thanks for sharing that. I think that's important for people to hear. Also, just like it's not all, rainbows and unicorns. Even if you're on a great show, it's not always. There's a lot of intricacies to everything that we've discussed. And thank you for sharing that. And I did lie, because I do have a question, which was, you made
shoot.
The Toe, I think it was called, with JR.
Yes.
And yep. I saw it and really dug it, and really dug that I believe you raised money maybe through crowdfunding. And you see, to me, I'm shocked to hear you saying you're just in the Yellowstone phase, realizing the importance of the audience. To me, the audience has been such an instrumental part of your whole rise. And I'm just curious if you have plans to direct again. I can't remember if you also wrote that that, or did JR
I
write
did
it?
write that. I did
Yeah.
write that.
Do you have plans to do
And
more, or are you developing anything, or where are you with that stuff?
I have several projects on the development slate right now. And as a performer, you grow up as an actor and you relate to projects that you read or see or that are sort of in your mind. You relate to them differently than as an accomplished filmmaker. So I'm understanding the differences of how I need to think to succeed, because I still have so many of the negative parts of my brain that will say, you're not smart enough to do that. What you have in mind sounds so grand, but you, Ian, you can't do that. Look at Christopher Nolan. He can do that. Look at all these, that's for them. I have to fight that constantly. And I'll get so excited and I'll have obsession and I'll be writing and make ideas. And then literally the next day I'll be like, I'm wasting my time. It's never going to do anything. So I fight that. But you have to, otherwise, you're going to stop. I desperately want to direct, because for me, that is, you're the storyteller. You get to choose. As an actor, one of my biggest gripes, if you were to ask me, is we break down the scripts and we see the sets and we know what we're going to be doing, and we assume the other actor's stuff, and we go in with all of this thing that we want to do on the day, and the director's like, oh yeah, that's but here's what I want you to do, and it's like, but I all this stuff that's now unfulfilled that I've been in love with working on, and they go, we're going to do it this way. That's hard. So the idea, and there's really no way around that, right? So if I write and want to direct something and an actor comes in with the same thing, I'm going to say, that's awesome. I'd like you to do it this way because it's my story or it's my thing. Now, granted, you have to dance and merge that in a way that is amicable for everybody. But apart from just making it sound like I want to be the boss of the set, is the messaging of the story. And to me, that's the next stage of when I think about developing. What is it that why? What am I, what for? Is it, I don't want to just make a cool action movie because I think it would be fun, or a fight sequence, or a car chase, or an adventure story. It's the message. And that needs to be so tight and so perfectly tuned that until I have that and I can throw a dart with it, I'm not going to try to produce something that I'm not ready for yet. And I'm in a little bit of a gap period, but yes, I definitely want to write and direct and perhaps segue out of acting so much, because I've done it for a long time. So I want to see some of these other hats that some of my friends are putting on that I think would be fun to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. Look, I'm so grateful that we got to do this. We got the time together. I know it has been like a wild goose chase, but it feels, as with most things, it feels like I caught you at the right moment. Even just your answer there, and even having gone through, if we did this a couple of years ago, maybe it would have been in the midst of that period when you were in a darker period. I feel like you're in a place in your life, it seems, at least from the outside, where your personal life, your artistic, your career, you feel like, I feel like you're in a nice grounded spot where you seem grateful, you seem open for what's to come. I think more big things are coming your way. And I really appreciate you. I know we don't get to hang or see each other, talk to each other much, but I really do. I appreciate your friendship, and I love watching you from afar. So thank you for
Matt, it's my pleasure. I know it took a long time, but this does feel like it was right. And when I said, hey, I might be coming to New York, we could maybe get together then, you were like, no, we got to do it now, because you're going to dog me for another year. And you were right, because I can find an excuse to not do something, but this feels so easy and genuine. And every time you and I hang out, we've worked together, a bunch of times over the last, 8 years. We always pick up right where we left off. And that's a very comfortable thing. And I do feel very open in talking to you. And I got to be honest, a couple of times I'm talking to you, I'm thinking to myself, should I be saying this? And I'm like, well, I'm doing it now. But you have a way of making, this interview feel comfortable to me. So thanks for listening. I know I can go on at times, so I appreciate you, and I hope you had fun. I had a ball.
I loved it, and ask my wife. You'll never talk more than I do. She's like,
When
please shut him up. She'll be so happy to see me quiet and you doing more of the talking. Trust me.
Well, I think I'll be in New York in September. So let's the three of us go out and have a bite together. We can all tell some old stories.
I'd love to do that. And yeah, Ian Bohen. For anybody who doesn't know Ian, where can they follow you? What are the handles on Instagram and X and all that?
Just my name, Ian Bohen, Bohen, Instagram and X, and that's it. Yeah, I kind of look at everything. So if you really want to know something or have a question, I'll probably see it and probably respond to you at some point.
He's not joking, guys. He is very connected to his audience. So thank you, brother. And
my pleasure. Thank you,
Thank
Matty.
you, everybody, for listening. All right, that is it. Thank you to today's special guest, and thank you for listening or watching, however you got to us. We hope you enjoyed it. If you dug this conversation, you want to come back week to week and listen to our mini episodes that are ripped from our Insiders Acting Community Zooms. And if you dig them, you want to join the community yourself, go to 10,000nos.com to learn how. In the meantime, remember that failure is just opportunity in disguise. You can flip the script and make your setbacks serve you. We'll see you next time.